director with the Texas Homeschool Coalition. I'll try and keep it relatively brief since we're a little bit past 10 o'clock already. But I want to give you guys a brief overview real fast that despite the fact that the name is Texas Homeschool Coalition, we actually deal much more broadly than that on issues of parental rights in general. So if there are issues that you guys come across during the session that you guys feel are relevant to parental rights, those are the types of issues that we follow. And we appreciate people making sure to keep us informed and in the loop on things that they're working on in that regard. A lot of the things that we'll be doing this session will be in regards to health issues such as immunizations, some bills that have already been filed that sort of strip away parental rights when it comes to their children receiving immunizations or other types of health care. And then issues at CPS in particular. Actually, that's one of the big areas that we deal in is CPS law, because that's one of the main areas where parental rights are removed sometimes without any reason at all, is when CPS comes into your home. There are a couple specific bills that we're working on that I'll give you guys numbers for, and that's House Bill 524 by Representative Cindy Burkett. She's filed that for us the last two sessions. It's a parental rights bill that we filed that amends Chapter 153 of the Family Code. A lot of people don't know that in Texas, under the Family Code, it is legal right now, if you're a single parent, for you to be sued for access to or possession of your child by your mother or father-in-law, and for them to potentially receive that possession for an undefined period of time without having to provide any evidence against you that you are actually an unfit parent. So you can have your child removed for an undefined period of time, and we've had cases where the parent didn't end up seeing the child for 4 or 5 years at a time without there even being an accusation against them that they were unfit. And that's as a result of a loophole that exists in the code. It's not intended to work that way. We've been trying to close that for about 4 sessions now. So that's House Bill 524 that Representative Cindy Burkett is filing. Donna Campbell is going to be filing that for us in the House if she hasn't filed it already this week. Hopefully that number will come out by the end of the week. One of the other issues that we're working on that John mentioned is called the Tim Tebow bill. I'd be interested to know, raise your hand if you've heard of the Tim Tebow bill before. Okay, a few people. The Tim Tebow bill in various forms has been passed in about 30 other states already, and it allows homeschool students to compete in the public school extracurricular activities that are sponsored by UIL, which are the same activities that the tax dollars of those homeschool students are already paying for. And we can't opt out of the tax system, but we can't opt into the extracurricular system either. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation there that homeschoolers have had to deal with for a while. Even though if you actually roll the clock back about 100 years, we used to be included. We were excluded about 100 years ago, and ever since then, we've been trying to get back in. So we actually have a really good shot at getting back in this session. Representative Harold Dutton actually is the one who's carrying that for us in the House, and I'll stop to make a point on that real fast. You should not assume that everybody on the other side of the aisle disagrees with you on every issue. There are some issues that you can find agreement on, and it's really beneficial to that issue when you can draw support from across the aisle in order to push it. So Representative Harold Dutton, despite the fact that he's a Democratic representative who's been around in the House for quite a while, he's one of the biggest supporters of that bill. He really doesn't understand the whole idea of taxing someone and then not allowing them to take advantage of the thing that you're taxing them for. And so he's carried that for us the last 2 sessions, this one included. And then Senator Connie Burton is planning to file that for us in the House. The bill number on that, in the Senate. The bill number on that in the House is 347. So we're hoping to get a bill number from the Senate sometime later this week. Those are the 2 issues that we're pushing at the moment. We are considering the possibility of trying to file a state parental rights amendment to the Texas Constitution. That's something that we're going to be looking into here in the next couple weeks. So anything from a parental rights perspective that you guys come across is something that will be relevant to us. So we would appreciate knowing about that. Yes?
Chapter 26 of the Texas Education Code is parental rights. It has no enforcement or teeth in it to get it enforced. Mm-hmm. And ISDs bully that and butcher it all the time.
Yeah, and that's actually true of a lot of different sections of the Education Code and the Family Code. And so,
what's a typical argument for someone who would not want to pass the Tim Tebow bill? I mean, what would they say to you?
That is actually a fascinating question, because I've heard very few well-articulated arguments against it. One of the biggest arguments that we get from school districts in particular is they say, well, you can't implement it, right? There's just no way to, there's no way to integrate us into the system. The problem with that is that the deputy director of UIL helped us to craft the language in order to avoid that problem, right? You know, he helped us to pick the language out very specifically so that they would be able to enforce it accurately if it was passed. So that kind of cuts the legs out from under the idea that UIL isn't going to be able to implement it. And one of the other arguments I heard that was really fascinating was they said homeschoolers and public schoolers just shouldn't mix that way. So, if you can tell me what you think that means, but I haven't heard a whole lot of well-articulated arguments against it. So that actually passed the Senate last session, ended up dying in the House when Chairman Jimmy Don Aycock in the House Education Committee sat on the bill all the way up until the deadline. That was after he told us that he supported the bill, but you'll find out that happens relatively frequently. So those are the issues that we're going to be working on, yes.
Okay, all of us have probably gotten something from Gary Gates in the mail recently. This is an issue he always used to work on. And I'm wondering now, I mean, is he, what is he doing now? Do you know what he's doing? Because, I mean, I don't want to throw him out, you know, because even Harold Dutton was the author of one of the bills that he had one session. And so, I mean, are you working with him? Is he working with you? Is he looking for your help? Does he want to support you? Do you know what he's doing?
We have not been in contact with Gary Gates on this issue at all this session, in any form or fashion. You will find that there are some homeschoolers, by percentage they are the extreme minority, but they're also the loudest. You'll find that there are some homeschoolers who are afraid that if the Tim Tebow bill is passed, then the government is going to follow it up with strings that they come back to regulate you with. That might be a legitimate concern, except that we've passed it in 30 other states, and in all of those 30 other states, that has never happened. And the attorney who argued the Leeper decision, which is the one that originally clarified that Texas law classifies homeschools as unaccredited private schools, the attorney who argued that decision, we followed up with him to make sure we weren't missing anything and said, look, just to verify, we are correct that this has absolutely no bearing on the classification of homeschools as private schools. And he said, no, you're right, has no bearing on it whatsoever. But unfortunately, people are afraid regardless of the facts in many situations. So you'll hear arguments like that from some homeschoolers who show up at the Capitol and say, oh, well, if we pass a Tim Tebow bill, then the government will follow it up with regulation. Historically, that has never happened, and there is no legal precedent for it happening. So I hope that answered all the questions.